joining us from the Princeton Times Leader in Kentucky. We'll talk a little bit about Elijah Sindelar. Todd, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We very much appreciate the time. And obviously, Elijah, first commit in the Purdue class of 2015. And tell us a little bit about, obviously seen him play extremely impressive numbers last year, 44 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Still interesting to us and at least to me that Purdue gets a kid like that out of Kentucky. Obviously, Jared Parker had something to do with that. But talk a little bit about what you've seen in Todd Griffin that makes you think that he's going to be successful at the next level.
Well, he's just a big, strong-armed kid. And, sometimes I've almost compared him to Tom Brady, the way he throws the ball. Now, don't go and tell everybody I said he's Tom Brady because he's not there yet. But when you look at the kid physically, I don't think he has any limitations as far as the upside from a physical standpoint. There's not really any throws he can't make. Now, there are some things he still needs to work on. He still needs to work on his leadership. He's a bit of a quiet kid, and sometimes that's tough when you're the quarterback, when everybody's looking to you to be that leader. I think sometimes he needs to be a little more vocal in the way he leads the team. And a few mechanical things he does. When he throws the ball, he'll get stuck back on his back foot sometimes and sail a few passes. But I think his upside is just incredible.
Todd, what kind of strikes you both about him as an overall athlete and as a competitor? Nowadays, it seems like quarterback is a 12-month-a-year job. These kids go to so many camps. They all have personal coaches, it seems like, but he still plays basketball. He still plays baseball. Just kind of what strikes you about his just overall athleticism and just him wanting to compete?
Well, for these parts, he's a bit of a freak of nature because we just don't see a whole lot of kids like that. And it was certainly a good luck stroke when he moved to Caldwell County, and Caldwell County got to take advantage of that, for the last several years. But I think Elijah sometimes thinks he's a baseball player first, and he's playing these other sports, on the side. But he works really hard. I think the thing about Elijah is a lot of places are looking for a quarterback to come in and be the savior of the team or the savior of the program. And I think Elijah just wants to be another player, whether that's baseball or basketball or football. I think the kid just likes to play sports, and he wants to go out and compete.
How big a high school is, in terms of Kentucky, what class level, and I should have done my homework a little better about what level of competition has he played against and in terms of size of schools?
Well, Caldwell County has about 630 students. It's a 2A school for football, fixing to go 3A, but Kentucky has 6 classes, and those classes kind of get diluted a little bit. But Caldwell County is not a real big school. For a Class 2A school in Kentucky, Caldwell County plays a fairly competitive schedule, but he's not seeing the same kind of competition that he would see if he was at a Louisville school or a Northern Kentucky school or certainly not a bigger city like that.
You look at him and he's talked about wanting to be in engineering. Obviously, he must be a pretty good student, a 4.0 student coming in. Do you see that in his play? Just in terms of his, again, anybody can have 44 touchdown passes, I suppose, and only 8 picks in a season is heading things in the right direction. But talk about his personality. Talked about him being quiet, but he obviously's got to have some intellectual capability, to say the least.
Oh, he's a very smart kid, and the thing is, he wants to get better. I've seen him have games where he would throw for 300 or 400 yards and 5, 6, 7 touchdowns. And the first thing he'll say to Caldwell head coach David Barnes after the game is, "I know what I did wrong here. I know what I did wrong here." And he had a really big game last year, and they came in and Caldwell's coaches and Elijah found a full page of stuff that he did, quote, unquote, wrong in that game. So I think he's a real smart kid, and he wants to get better, and he's trying to learn the game the best he can.
Todd, his high school really seems to kind of chuck it around. Do they do that because they have Sindelar, or did they do that before they had Sindelar?
They actually did a lot of that before Sindelar got there. The head coach is David Barnes, and he's good friends with Tony Franklin. I don't know how much you guys know about the Tony Franklin system, but they're really good friends. Tony Franklin played at Caldwell County, and David Barnes brought that style of football here even before we knew about an Elijah Sindelar coming to Caldwell County. But that being the case, I think the passing aspect has advanced just because when you've got somebody like an Elijah Sindelar there with that big, strong arm, I mean, you have to utilize that.
You know, you talked about him being a guy that, you know, that he's talked about, and I've read some of your stuff on him too, that very committed to playing football, but he is a baseball guy that can throw, and he talks a little bit about maybe the opportunity to play some baseball in college as well. How do you size that up?
I really don't know how much the coaches at Purdue have talked to him about that. I think Elijah wants to play some baseball. Now, the comments he made to me were that he didn't think he could play as a freshman just because of the engineering and trying to play quarterback at the same time. But he thought that maybe later on he could try to pitch some. I think he's normally a third baseman. I don't think he thinks he has the time to devote to that, but I believe he could probably come in and maybe pitch somewhere down the road. He says he's hitting 90 miles an hour with his fastball, which, you know, again, he's a 6'5", big, strong-arm kid, and he told me he would like to add 3 or 4 miles an hour to that this season. So, you know, if he could get to there, he's definitely an asset for somebody on the baseball field.
Yeah, no question. Oh, hey, Todd, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. Some good insight on Elijah Sindelar. I'm sure we'll be watching and hearing from you and from Elijah throughout the course of, you know, the next 12 months till he signs with Purdue and his opportunity to do that. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll look forward to talking again soon.
All right, you guys are welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
All right, Brian, let's turn our sights to basketball. Obviously, last night the Boilermakers go down in a very impressive performance by Michigan State, shooting especially. 94-79 win for the Spartans in West Lafayette. You were just down at practice. The mood of the team, anything new and exciting with the group?
Seems like, you know, same kind of demeanor. You know, they've really started these last couple weeks talking about this one game at a time thing. Sterling Carter, in particular, has been very, very outspoken about it. I think that's kind of their mindset right now. That's something kids say a lot of the time when there's nothing else to say. So actions kind of speak louder than words. The Indiana game, they wanted to put that behind them right away. Obviously, the next result wasn't very good. But at the same time, you know, you really have to look at the way Michigan State played, the situation Michigan State was in, and just said, you know, Purdue played well on offense. They did. They had another really good offensive game, another efficient, productive offensive game. They obviously, anytime you give up 94 points, you can't say you played even okay on defense. You played badly. That's too many points to give up and ever win. But at the same time, you have to look at what Michigan State was able to do, shooting the ball the way they shot the ball. And, you know, you just have to wonder, if Purdue just played okay on defense, I don't think it would have changed the outcome at all in any sort of measure.
It's funny because in the Express this week I did a little research on Purdue shooting over 48% under Matt Painter since Painter's second year, 38-1. Then last night they shoot 49% and lose, so that number now 38-2. Kendall Stephens showed some things, you know, in the first half that would certainly not only excited the Purdue basketball team, but certainly people watching the game on TV and in person. Making some strides, certainly seems to be doing that. He had a nice story in the Glossy about him still kind of that fatigue that's associated with, you know, not being in a great shape coming in because of the labrum injury, but certainly was very impressive last night in the first half especially.
Yeah, his body's wearing down, but as he atrophies from a physical standpoint, his confidence is getting to the level where he is playing really, really well right now, and he's showing that he's got a chance not just to be a good player at Purdue, but a great player at Purdue. You know, he's been good for about one play a game the last 5 or 6 games where you just see it happen and you realize there's no way in you-know-what he did that 6 weeks ago because he wasn't in a place to do it from a physical standpoint and he wasn't in a place to do it from a confidence standpoint. But he has been so productive the last couple of games, and you can just kind of see him coming of age. Obviously, yesterday, 19 points against Michigan State was kind of a breakthrough. But he's been headed in that direction the past 4 games now. He's had 4 back-to-back-to-back very good games ever since he kind of shot Purdue out of that Ohio State game. That's a real indication of maturity. It's a real indication of him showing he can be consistent and an indication of him getting better. What's really interesting about Purdue here the last couple of games is that they're playing some of their best offensive basketball of the year. The last 2 games especially, ever since that 49-point debacle at Ohio State when they imploded in the final 10 minutes. They answered with 2 of their best offensive games of the year. And they've done it without A.J. Hammonds doing much of anything, and they've done it with, obviously, Tyrone Johnson struggling against Michigan State, as he's done a couple times this Big Ten season. So what that means is Kendall Stephens is playing really well. Ronnie Johnson's playing the best he has in his career. I don't know. Obviously, he's got to make more free throws. I don't know how you go from 8 for 8 against Indiana to 1 of 5 against Michigan State. That speaks to focus and concentration. But he is playing really well as a point guard. He's found that balance between looking for his scoring opportunities and setting up teammates. I don't know how many assists he's had the last 2 games, but he could have twice as many. He's gotten teammates fouled so often, and he's had so many assists go by the wayside because guys couldn't finish around the basket. But he's playing really well. Rayfel Davis is playing very well, too. So Purdue collectively right now is playing its best offensive basketball of the season, and I think you saw that against Indiana. It resulted in a win. You saw it against Michigan State, but they just couldn't even get in Michigan State's way defensively.
About 2 or 3 minutes left in the show, and had a question about Nebraska. Obviously, Nebraska was a very tight game. You know, Purdue was winless in the conference. Is that right? When it was their first conference win when they beat Nebraska, if I'm remembering right. But very tight game down the stretch. And since then, you know, Nebraska has played very, very well. It's going to be a tough game, certainly on Sunday afternoon in Lincoln.
They are playing very well. Petway is making a case for first-team All-Big Ten. It's going to be hard to do that on a team that doesn't get a lot of recognition, though it probably should. They're playing for an NCAA tournament bid. They're very difficult to beat at home. They've lost 1 Big Ten game at home, and it came down to the buzzer against Michigan, who's, you know, playing for a Big Ten title right now. Ever since Biggs got kicked off that team, it seems like they've been a different team. You know, I was just going to ask Ronnie Johnson about playing against Nebraska, but the player he went up against is no longer there. They kicked their point guard off their team a couple weeks ago, and that might be, I don't know this Biggs kid at all, but that might be sort of one of those addition by subtraction situations where you get rid of somebody and it all kind of comes together. You remember a couple years ago, Purdue lost a guy in the middle of the season, and all of a sudden everything started to click offensively because the guy who was the disruption was no longer there. I think Petway has been kind of the driving force for them. I think Tim Miles has done an unbelievable job there. You really have to give him credit. But this is going to be a really difficult game for Purdue to win. They are very, very difficult to beat at home. Very difficult to beat in general, as they showed you Sunday in East Lansing.
You know, it's interesting because Tim Miles doesn't seem like a guy that's going to kick anybody off of anything. But the fact that you look at him and you say, boy, he may not be a discipline-related guy, but obviously whatever happened in that situation, they felt the need to get that done.
I'm guessing the stand-up comedian Tim Miles we see in the media is probably not the same Tim Miles his team sees behind closed doors. If he was that really, really funny, genuine, nice guy that we see, I don't think you would be able to command any respect from your players. So he's obviously a very good coach in addition to a very, very entertaining interview.
Yeah, Tom Izzo does a little bit of that himself in a different way. I just thought even like last night in postgame, kind of went on and on. But and it was nice for him, the 15-point win. You got, and the bus isn't ready to go yet. You got time to do that. But Izzo certainly comes with that nice guy approach, and yet a little bit different on the sidelines.
Watch him during timeouts.
Yeah. or any number of pictures you have of him knocking his head against the wall. Though we had a good picture of him after a 3 of Gary Harris, kind of pushing him down the court. So this is a guy. This is obviously a key stretch. Purdue still has some things to play for. You still have an opportunity to. You probably in the last 5 games, Purdue is only going to be a favorite in one of those games. If you look at it from an odds perspective, and that be the last one against Northwestern, not a cakewalk either. But what does this team, in your view, have to play for right now? What's the most important thing it needs to get done from now till the end of the season?
Well, I think if they'd been able to get last night, I think you might have worked your way back onto the fringe of that NCAA tournament.
At least talk.
Discussion. Yeah. Well, the fringe of that talk, which isn't quite the talk, but you can talk about the talk.
Yeah.
But Purdue doesn't really have very many quality wins. You know, you look at winning at West Virginia, that was a good one. Obviously, Boston College isn't, even though they beat Syracuse, they're a bad basketball team in their conference. Purdue in the Big Ten hasn't beaten anybody particularly relevant, and you're going to get some more chances here. You can get a Wisconsin, you can get a Michigan, but Purdue has to show it can do it, and they've had a bunch of chances, including a couple on their home floor, and haven't been able to get it done. So if Purdue, if it wants to be over 500 at the end of the year, obviously it can't. It's going to have to win
Let's win one more game.
a couple of games. Well, to be 500, you have to win that one game, and the one game you're referring to they'll be favored in is having Northwestern at home. But you obviously have to get a couple more going into the Big Ten tournament to have reasonable hopes, probably for the NIT. I don't know what the NIT admission standards, so to speak, are because I've never covered one and I haven't looked it up.
Just
yet.
have to be over 500.
Okay, well,
So-
there you go. If Purdue wants to be over 500,
I mean, you have to be 500 or better, I should
okay,
say.
well, all right. Then Purdue obviously has to get one of these games it's not going to be favored in order to not have to have a play-in game in the Big Ten tournament. And obviously, you don't want to go into the Big Ten tournament needing to beat anybody because the league this year is so crazy that there is no team you want to play except for maybe Northwestern. And I say that knowing Purdue lost to Northwestern in Evanston.
Yeah, no question. Northwestern kind of going on a little bit of a down cycle now. Well, Brian, thank you for joining us. We have run out of time. And just a program reminder, next Wednesday, and you'll be hearing more of that on the site as well, Daryl Hazel will join us at 3 o'clock for a special edition of Gold and Black Live. No show next Friday, but Daryl Hazel will join us at 3. We'll talk spring football, recruiting, anything else that Daryl wants to talk about, we'll talk about as well. So
What day was that again?
that is Wednesday.
What day?
Wednesday.
Okay, I've been told you have to say things 3 times
Or 7
for
sometimes.
people for people to really process. So that's Wednesday, right?
Wednesday at
the
3
day
o'clock.
between Tuesday and Thursday.
That's
correct?
every day of the
Okay.
week. That's Wednesday at 3, and we'll look forward to having
1
the
hour
coach-
after chat, by the way.
Yeah, and that's right. And a couple hours before Purdue and Michigan take the court in men's basketball in Mackey Arena. So I want to thank our sponsors, Hilton Garden Inn, of course, State Farm agent Trent Johnson, XXX on the hill but on the level since 1929, and John Basham and our good friends at Basham Rental, still running those student apartments, and there's still time to do that as you get ready for the 2014-15 school year, and I'm down the line. So I want to thank also Kim and Gordon and Allie, all the folks at WLFI, even Chad who walked in, and he's always on with weather. He's bringing that good weather to us today in relative terms, good and windy weather. I want to thank everybody else that's Kyle and, of course, Rob Hughes for joining us, too. So we'll see you next Wednesday. That's Wednesday, as Brian wants us to repeat again, 3 o'clock. And not Tuesday, not Thursday, but Wednesday for Gold and Black Live and Coach Daryl Hazel. Have a good week, everybody.